Everybody, welcome to another DevOps.com webinar. I'm Jared Richter from DevOps.com, and today's webinar is titled Jenkins 2 and Beyond. Today's webinar is brought to you by CloudBees. Please note that today's presentation will be recorded, and the slides and presentation will be available on DevOps.com within 24 hours. Just a reminder, on the right side of your screen towards the bottom of your GoToWebinar control panel is the question box. We encourage you to submit your questions, and we will be addressing them in the last 15 minutes of today's webinar. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another DevOps.com webinar. I'm Jared Richter from DevOps.com, and today's exciting webinar is Jenkins 2 and Beyond. Today's webinar is brought to you by our friends at CloudBees. Please note that today's presentation will be recorded, and the slides and presentation will be available on DevOps.com within 24 hours. Today we have joining us Patrick Wolf, Director Product Manager at CloudBees. Hi Patrick, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks Jared.
Thank you, and I'm glad to hear. And we also have Brian Dawson, Jenkins Product Marketing Manager at CloudBees. Brian, how are you doing today? All right. Gentlemen, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to get this show on the road. So without further ado, take it away.
Thanks, Jared. This is Patrick Wolf speaking, and you can reach me at Touching the Cork at Twitter. And Brian will be joining us a little bit later to talk about some of the CJ3-specific items. But I want to talk about Jenkins 2.0, which is the first major release of Jenkins in about 10 years. We've gone through about 8 releases of the 2.0 so far, so we're at version 2.8 right now, and it should be coming out in an LTS release later this summer once that's settled. So as I said, this is the biggest release in Jenkins history other than the 1.0 release way back when CK was still Sun. And this is quite a big accomplishment for us just to get that out in people's hands and to push the Jenkins platform further and farther down the field. And with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of Jenkins and where we've come from and how far Jenkins has come over the years. It's been around again for about 10 years now. It went through 651 weekly builds, so actually a little bit more than that. The latest LTS release is 651, so it's gone through quite a few more weekly builds than that by now. But that is represents quite a long haul for a 1.0 release, and it's come quite a long way in those 10 years. As you can see from the screenshot from one of the original versions of Hudson, which became Jenkins in the open source community. It has been around for quite a while, and the UX can prove it with some of the old table displays that we've got from that as well. Another major milestone, if anybody out there watches the TV series Silicon Valley on HBO, which is quite humorous, Kosuke took great pride in that in season 1 of Silicon Valley, the screenshot actually showed Jenkins being used by the guys as they're developing their software for that. And have something like that, Jenkins in a mainstream media event was pretty widely celebrated by Kosuke and the Jenkins contributors to see their hard work up on the screen like that. And so from those beginnings to where we are now, today we estimate there are about 1.5 million users of Jenkins out there, approximately 130,000 installations, and that's being conservative, and 400,000 build agents. Build agents used to be called slaves prior to 2.0, now build agents, and with that there's probably anywhere between 6 to 8 million jobs being run for continuous integration, continuous delivery with Jenkins. So from very humble beginnings at Sun to where it is today, it's seen tremendous growth over the years. With the latest Jenkins user survey, and this is from the past year, we can see that the use of Jenkins has increased. And as companies start to use Jenkins, the usage of Jenkins within the organization keeps growing and growing. So it starts very small and then will continue to grow very big within companies. And you've seen it's jumped 89% for most companies over the last year. So once a company starts to use it, they see the value of it and start using it more and more. And I'm assuming since everyone online is here to talk about Jenkins, they see the value and have used Jenkins and know about it and are excited to hear about what's coming next in that Jenkins too. Another key thing to note as we look forward to where we're going with Jenkins in the future is what has happened lately with Jenkins. As we see, primarily Jenkins has been known as a CI tool. It's been used for build and test, for automating tests and automated builds, and that hasn't changed. So between 2013 and 2015, the build is still primary, to 95% of people use Jenkins for builds, and now 97% of people use Jenkins for builds. Test went from 86 to 90, but we're seeing more and more users using it for doing deployments, putting things into operations, and actually moving that bar further downfield to more of a continuous delivery model instead of just a CI tool. And CI is still a huge factor out there for most people, but Jenkins is starting to encompass more and more of the full automation stack to drive continuous delivery. And Jules, can you advance the slide? I can't seem to advance right now. So again, one of the primary functions of Jenkins 2.0 is to move from CI to CD. Not that we're getting rid of CI, it's still going to be a major function of that, and CI is a major function of CD, but to actually move to be able to better serve the continuous delivery across that entire life cycle of the applications and put that into practice much more in Jenkins 2 than was possible in Jenkins 1. Next slide. So now we have a poll just with the assumption that everyone out there is using Jenkins. We just wanted to know how your organization is using Jenkins, just to see if the survey of the Jenkins community kind of matches where we were with the audience today as well. Okay, so we're seeing...
Okay, go ahead, Patrick.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know you were going to jump in, Jared, but it looks like the results for mostly general automation about 20% and continuous delivery about 20%. CI still 55%, so quite the majority of that, and then none of the above. So there are some non-Jenkins users out there, which is interesting. So hopefully by the end of this, if you guys have questions on how to start adopting Jenkins, we can start moving in that direction as well. Or maybe try to convince you of the need for Jenkins. So I'm waiting for the slides to come back. Hey, Jules, I can't see the slides at all. We put those back on?
Yeah, we're at the next slide. Continuous delivery with Jenkins 1.
Okay. I'll have to pull it up in PowerPoint and follow along that way. Okay, so as a preface to going into Jenkins 2.0, I wanted to talk a little bit about how some users were moving into continuous delivery with what was available in Jenkins 1 with the freestyle job available and setting that up and moving through that. So the next slide. So in 2014, there was an article published in InfoQ magazine or InfoQ.com written by Kosuke Kawaguchi, who's the founder of Jenkins and our CTO here at CloudBees, on how to set up Jenkins to do continuous delivery. And it was based on these steps of ensuring reproducible builds, sharing build artifacts throughout the pipeline, choosing the right granularity for each job, parallelizing and joining jobs, gates and approvals, visualizing the pipeline, organizing and securing the jobs, and then also being able to revision that pipeline and set it up into a version control system so any change in that pipeline could be recorded. So the article went into all the steps of how to do that with Jenkins 1.0. So the next slide, the graphic here is the graphic they set up for that pipeline in the article of a prompt for deployment to actually move that into deployment based on whether or not it met certain criteria to go to that. So the article actually did a good job of describing a continuous delivery model in Jenkins 1.0. So the next slide. So this is an example of one of the pieces of setting that up, though, and this is the static code quality analysis of that, which is one of the blocks within that pipeline. For every one of those blocks in the pipeline in 1.0 represents a different job in Jenkins. So to do continuous delivery, what you needed to do was actually take each one of those things that you wanted to do, set it up in a job, and then string those jobs together using another plugin, whether it's a parameterized build trigger or build flow or something like that, and try to run those jobs and organize all of those jobs and keep them up to date together as a whole unit to be able to do your continuous delivery pipeline. In addition to that, with 1.0 on the next slide, for visualizing the pipeline, there are certain plugins that are available, so the build pipeline plugin, the delivery pipeline plugin, to actually show that chaining of jobs for what the pipeline was. So based on that article and all the things that were done, about 2 years ago, Kosuke and Jesse Glick and the other contributors for Jenkins decided they wanted to build that in much more natively into Jenkins for that. And that's where a lot of the stuff behind 2.0 came about, was all that work that went into the pipeline plugin for that. So on the next slide, oops, so we are, so you can advance the slide. Okay, so this was the visualization. You can advance that one more. Okay, so with Jenkins 2, I want to take a step back and talk about some of the other things within Jenkins 2 as well before we get into the full pipeline available in Jenkins 2 for continuous delivery. So when Kosuke first laid out what he wanted to accomplish with Jenkins 2, there was a lot of stuff about pipeline in there, a new UX, making things easier out of the box. And One of the other things was that we wanted to make this an evolution, not a revolution. It's a drop-in replacement for 1.x. We don't want people to have to go back and break what they've already got to move to 2x. It should be just like another LTS release on top of what they've already got. It shouldn't break any plugins. It shouldn't break any installations. The goal was to make it as seamless as possible for that. With that, we also have a new community home, which I'll talk about in a second. And as I said, the out-of-the-box experience, the UX improvements in pipeline as code. So first off is the new home. If you've ever visited JenkinsCI.org, it is a little bit long in the tooth. It's been around for a long time, and it's based on a simple wiki. So the format has not been the prettiest. It has been functional, but somewhat dated, and there's also a lot of cruft in there that we wanted to get rid of. And also we wanted to move away from just being labeled as CI. We wanted to make it more generic. So with that, we've created a Jenkins.io website for the open source project. It's fully out and has been around for about 2 months now. We're trying to add more and more straight documentation to it instead of wiki pages. We've got use cases. We've got much easier places to find the downloads for Jenkins. And just a lot more useful information out there as we can add more and more to that. And we definitely want people to help contribute to this website as much as they can. And this is the community website. This is not run by CloudBees. This is run by the Jenkins community and for the Jenkins community. So the other piece that we really wanted to improve upon for Jenkins was for new users and out-of-the-box experience. With Jenkins, more and more people were starting to install Jenkins up on Amazon or out in the cloud. And Jenkins as an engine for running automation jobs should not be just available to anybody to go up and create a job and do those things. It's a very powerful tool for running multiple things. So what we wanted to really do was lock down Jenkins out of the box so that certain ports weren't open. You had to have access to that. Security is enabled by default so that when you install it somewhere, it's not just an open automation engine that you can run anything on or anybody can come and do something on. There's actually control now around that, and there's actually quite a few things within that we've changed, and it's the default settings. Mostly the things were available before, but now it starts in a more default secure state, and if you want to enable the things that were enabled before in Jenkins, you can actually turn those things off, but it just starts out in a more secure state by default. And there is a setup wizard for that. If anybody's tried Jenkins 2.0, you know that you have a setup wizard that says, you know, enter a password before you begin the security token, and then it walks you through setting up the plugins as well. And the reason, beyond security, the other thing with the setup wizard, we wanted to make sure that the plugins that you have when you first start Jenkins are the ones that you want. Previously in Jenkins, it installed with a set of embedded plugins, things like CVS, Subversion, a lot of this information, but it didn't embed Git. It didn't embed quite a few other plugins that most people are using these days, and keeping up with the times and just how people are doing their development now. We're also moving away from, you know, we want Jenkins to be much more vanilla engine when it installs, when the plugins can add more things to it. So we want the plugins and the engine to be separate as much as possible. So now there's a default set of plugins that you can install, and it's been updated based on the work from Daniel Beck and others to include much more functional plugins that more people are using these days. But you can also install it with no plugins. So if you select none in the wizard, it'll install no plugins, and pretty much the only thing you can do with no plugins is create a freestyle job to echo hello world. It has no version control, none of that. Or you can actually select a certain list of plugins from the list there in the setup wizard and install those explicitly for that, for getting that set up and running the first time. So slides aren't advancing for me. Can you advance it, Jules? So the last thing I really want to talk about for Jenkins 2 before I move into the pipeline is to talk about the user interface. Everyone knows Jenkins is an open source tool, and most open source tools aren't the prettiest, they aren't the most usable. They're basically, you create the feature and you make it functional and you put it in there, everybody contributes, and over time it just kind of grows and grows where the functions are there. It's just not designed from the ground up to have a great user experience. That's one of the things we at CloudBees are trying to do, is actually build a completely new user experience on top of Jenkins. If you've seen the Blue Ocean announcement from a couple weeks ago, that's going to be coming later this summer. We'll talk about that more at Jenkins World, and there'll be other topics on that as well. But for 2.0, we wanted to put in at least baby steps in the direction of making the user interface much better. So the new item page has completely been revamped in Jenkins 2. And also the freestyle job and the system configuration pages are now tabbed and allow you to set up things within the system configuration or the job configuration for freestyle jobs in a much easier way, because as you add build wrappers and other plugins to your jobs, that list of things in that page gets longer and longer, and that page can just continue to grow over time to where there's a huge amount of forms to fill out. And the tabs make it much easier to kind of segment that, break it up, and make it a lot easier flowing when you're configuring those jobs. So small things like that are available in 2.0. It's not a huge change from 1X, but it is something that we're trying to do incrementally before we get to the place where Blue Ocean can become the complete new overhauled user experience for users. And again, the Blue Ocean, if you haven't seen it, I welcome everyone to take a look at it. It's going to be released as a plugin. If you can advance the slide, Jules. So it's not going to replace the user experience of Jenkins. It's going to be an addition to the user experience of Jenkins. And we're hoping that over time, more and more of the functions that people use will be in Blue Ocean, and the need for the classic UX can kind of go away for that. So now we have another 2.0 poll question. And so we were just curious out there, how many people have tried 2.0? Are any people running it actively in production? Are people waiting for the LTS release before they install 2.0 and take a look at it? Or just none of the above? And the LTS was voted on by the Jenkins community, the governance board, last week or the week before, so they have chosen a candidate for that, and I believe the LTS should be available in July. And for those of you who don't know, LTS is the long-term stable or long-term support version, same as Ubuntu. It's supported for 3 months, so every 3 months there's a new LTS release that comes out for the Jenkins from the community. Okay. So it looks like about 12% are using it in production, which is interesting. If you guys have feedback on that, please send it to me. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that. 44% of people are waiting or investigating it. About a quarter of people are waiting for LTS, and then 16% haven't really touched it and don't plan to right now, it seems like, which is interesting. So not sure what my expectations were, but I'm glad to see that quite a few of you are actually trying it and playing around with it, if not running it in production already. Okay. So now I want to talk about the major step forward for Jenkins 2.0, which is the move towards more of a continuous delivery model of allowing new job types with the pipeline plugin in Jenkins. So last year at Jenkins World, Kosuke, Jesse Glick, and a lot of other people presented on the concept of pipeline as code and building these pipelines out. We've got the organization folders, the GitHub branch source plugin to start building that integration in with the SCMs to pull in the build job from the Jenkins file. So what this does is there's a new job type called pipeline within Jenkins. It's different than the freestyle job in that, one, it's written in code. It's a DSL, Groovy-based DSL. I'll talk about in a second. But it also is built on the durable task plugin. And the goal is that as the pipeline job runs, the build agent or the slave can become much more independent of the master. So if anything happens to the master, network connectivity glitch, anything like that, the job remains and continues to run. So there is job durability built in with the pipeline job. It's also written in script so that multiple steps, so all of the steps in a pipeline can be written within one within one job. You don't need multiple jobs strung together to get a pipeline constructed. Now it can all be done within one job. It makes job manageability just that much easier for doing that. And the other thing is that we wanted it to be as extensible and dry as possible. Since it is code, it can be stored in your repositories. There's also the ability to extend that and write your own libraries that can then be used within the pipeline scripts that your end users are writing as well. So all of the good things about code that come into this go into making the pipeline job a much better way of setting up jobs and running that. And this isn't only for doing CD. You can have a single stage job that just does CI. You can have it do one simple Maven build. You can have it do a build for anything. You can have it do a rake file. It doesn't have to be the full automation testing and everything else. It can just be a single stage in there as well. So all of the steps that we talked about in this previously with the InfoQ article, ensuring reproducible builds, sharing build artifacts, these are all things that were baked into pipeline. So Kosuke wrote that article in 2014, and looking at that, that was his model of saying, hey, these are the things that we need to account for in a pipeline. How do we do this in one system to have one single script to move forward and do that? So all of these steps can be done within one job now. You can do a stash, you can do an archive, you can move your artifacts around, you can actually check out from your SCM, and you can also visualize that and secure that with that. And again, with the Jenkins file, you can store that in your Git repository, your Subversion repository, and have that define the job and also have an audit trail for every change in that pipeline with that. So the DSL itself is built on top of Groovy because Groovy has been part of Jenkins for a long time. It just made sense to have it be in Groovy. But you don't have to go deep into Groovy. It is a DSL, so it is a higher level language that can be used very simply. It doesn't need to be parsed out. And you can actually take the different steps that you want to do and just kind of isolate those into shell scripts. You can take the same things that are doing in freestyle job and wrap them in the pipeline to make it much simpler. So the node is simply denoting that I need a build agent or an executor to run this on. I want to check out from my SCM, and then I want to do a get the git parse commit back into into my variable there. This is actually a little bit more set up than some of the simple jobs I've seen out there, but this one actually has a build stage and a deploy stage, which are going to be shown separately within the visualization for that. And so for anybody that's used Pipeline in the past, hopefully you know that, can you advance the slide, Jules? Not working for me. So at the end of the year, last year, we released the Stage View plugin, the Pipeline Stage View plugin. This was something that CloudBees had developed before, and we released it in open source in December, I believe, or January. And this allows you to see those stages. So in the example we saw before, we had a build stage and a deploy stage. You can see here that we've got multiple stages here. We've got build Docker images, unit tests across that. So each one of the stages that you define in a pipeline show up in the visualization. It shows you how long that took. And actually, if you click on any of these stages, you can actually, it'll tell you success failed, and it'll have a link to the logs. I don't have a screenshot of that. So you can actually see the explicit logs for that stage only, and it's only going to be that stage. You're not going to have a huge, long console log of everything that's happened for that entire job. It'll only be for that particular stage, which is a quite nice and concise way of looking at part of the build without the whole thing. So can you advance the slide for me, Jules? Okay. Also, there are several language enhancers built into Jenkins. This is actually a page at the highest, at the root level of Jenkins. If you go to /pipeline-syntax within Jenkins for anything with the pipeline plugin installed, you'll have this page. And on this page, there is a reference generator, a generated reference for the language. And this is based on all of the plugins that are available within your Jenkins. So it introspects all of those plugins, looks at what steps are available for pipeline and in part of that, and then gives you a reference for how to use that within your pipeline script. There's also a link to online documentation, a snippet generator, and a GDSL to download for the IDEA plugin. Can you advance from? There it went. So the snippet generator on the right is built into Jenkins, and this lets you put in the function you want to use, select, actually that's the scrolling. So the snippet generator, sorry, I thought I had a screenshot of that. The snippet generator will let you, the same thing as the reference documentation, you select the function you want to use, put in a couple of parameters. It'll show you what parameters are available for that, and then it will generate the DSL for that. You can cut and paste, or sorry, copy and paste and move that into your script as well. So if you want to do a couple things, it's a very quick and easy way to get up and running with a pipeline job without having to type everything manually. And then once you're in editing, either in IntelliJ on the left or within Jenkins on the right, with the GDSL file that you can download from Jenkins, the GDSL is the same thing as a reference document, but formatted to provide you with autocomplete within IntelliJ. Will give you the ability to create pipeline scripts within your IDE and save that, commit that back to your Git repository, your Subversion repository, and use that as your pipeline for that. So with that, I've made mention of that. There is a thing, there's plugins for Bitbucket, there's plugins for Git, for GitHub, and there's generic support for Git and Subversion as well to be able to do multi-branch jobs. So by saving a Jenkins file in your repository, you can actually generate a job for every branch and every pull request within that repository based on the contents of that Jenkins file. So the Jenkins file will be read every time there's a commit to that repository or a commit to that Jenkins file, and we'll rerun that job based on the contents of that Jenkins file. So if you modify a Jenkins file and want to change your pipeline, it automatically picks up on that from your repository. So the entire life cycle of the pipeline exists in your repository. It stays with the application code itself if you want it to. So every time there's a change to the application, if you want to update that pipeline, you can. So the pipeline and the application are in sync within that repository the entire time. And on top of that, as I said, with Bitbucket Cloud, Bitbucket Server, GitHub, and GitHub Enterprise, you can actually, what's called an organization folder or a Bitbucket team, select that job type within Jenkins, and it will automatically go through all of your repositories that you have access to within that organization that you select, find the Jenkins files, and automatically generate jobs for every one of those repositories and every branch on that repository that has a Jenkins file as well. So if you actually have a model of creating these Jenkins files, you almost never need to go back into Jenkins to set up jobs. It's only to review the outcome of those jobs and to look at whether things failed or not. And again, with Bitbucket and GitHub, you're going to get that response from Jenkins into your build status API to be able to see what happened from Jenkins. So as I mentioned before, one of the primary objectives was to make this as extensible as possible as well. And with that, there is a global library built into Jenkins. It's part of the internal Git repository within Jenkins. And if you look it up, it's called the CPS Global Library if you're looking for the documentation on it. And this lets you define classes that can be used throughout the entire Jenkins master. So if you've got pipeline scripts and you want to have a certain function run for all of those pipelines and you want to simplify it, you can write it once and then just call that class from every Jenkins file, and it will run the same job for all of those based on different parameters or however you set that up. So you can make it as very abstract and very simple as possible for setting up jobs to where all the logic exists in Jenkins, and the Jenkins file is just a one-liner saying, do this pipeline. There's also a plugin that was written by Oleg Minishev called the Remote Loader plugin that actually lets you load in pipeline jobs from other Git repositories, and it will load them in as more pipeline. So those functions would be available in your pipeline after it's been loaded in from the Git repository. Pipeline has a built-in load and also read file step. So the read file step reads it in as text. I think there was an example of that on the DSL page that I showed before on that slide. And that will read in the file. You can actually view the contents, do whatever you want to with it. The load command actually says the same thing, but actually wraps that in an evaluate. So it actually evaluates it as pipeline code. So if you load a file from, if you have a Jenkins file and you want to load in a secondary file with configuration settings, you load that in and we'll actually use that as more pipeline code. So you can actually have multiple files working in conjunction and shared across different things to do that. The other last thing to mention is that more and more, we'll have more examples eventually, but you can create plugins that actually only have pipeline steps in them. They don't have to have visual pieces, they don't have to have a UI, they don't have to do anything else, but they can actually just contribute to the language of pipeline. So the same thing that you would do in a global library, you can actually put some boilerplate on that, create a actual plugin that has an HPI file that can be moved around from Jenkins to Jenkins or shared with the community through the plugin manager or the update center across all Jenkins out there. And there are some examples if they're out there, and we're looking to add more and more. The one thing I don't have on this, and I should have put on there, is under Jenkins CI on GitHub, there's also a pipeline examples repository. And anything that anyone wants to contribute as an example of how to do this in pipeline can be shared there. It's a way for the community to give back and also share amongst themselves anything that in pipeline for either simple code to very complex examples as well. So it's not something that you have to, everyone has to go out and reinvent the wheel every time they want to do something in pipeline. So the next slide, I believe, is a poll question. Can you advance that, Jules? Yeah. So for this poll question, mostly just curious, how many people have experimented or have deployed pipeline as it is today. So the difference between a standalone job would just be a pipeline job that's just a standalone versus the pipeline as code with multi-branch would be storing the Jenkins files and using that to generate jobs on the fly as you construct those jobs in your repository. Okay, so a little over half people haven't tried it yet. 7% have tried multi-branch. 16% have a few standalone jobs, and about 22% experimenting. So about half people have tried it, at least in some form or another. So hopefully it's been working out for everyone. If not, then please hit me up either in email or in Twitter and let me know what you did or didn't like, and we'll continue to improve on that. We have quite a bit of improvements that we have planned for this summer and the rest of this year just to make pipeline much easier to get up and running with, and also add as many plugins and composite features on top of that as we can. So having said all of that about Jenkins 2, Jenkins 1.0, pipeline, where we're looking to go in the next 10 years, hopefully we're not going to be 10 years before Jenkins 3.0. We actually want to have a major release much sooner than that. But where we want to take Jenkins right now is across three major themes. The first theme is the user experience. Like I mentioned, there are incremental steps in 2.0. Blue Ocean will push that further and further for that envelope out to make the user experience much better. And we've got quite a few people at CloudBees and hopefully more and more in the community dedicated to making the user experience just a great thing within Jenkins. Within Jenkins core as well, the major themes are going to be scalability and availability. Right now, Jenkins scales to quite a few jobs, but it is still using Jenkins Home on the file system, and that kind of becomes a limiting factor in how many jobs and how much Jenkins can do. It's also a singleton Java instance right now for doing that, which means that all the jobs are run through one central hub. There's a master driving all of the slaves and the build agents out there. So things like that, we want to make sure that, you know, we're not going to sacrifice the standalone Jenkins of a team of, 15 guys setting up and running continuous integration jobs. That's still going to be one of the primary use cases, but we also want to make it to where you can take Jenkins and install it and have a highly available, scalable CI/CD system that can run 10 to 15,000, 20,000 jobs concurrently on that system, given enough resources, obviously. But Jenkins itself should not be the limiting factor there. It should be the system underlying that that's going to be the limiting factor of that. And obviously continuous delivery and pushing that Jenkins into more and more crevices for getting the full automation of everything in that life cycle is a major factor in how we're driving the future of Jenkins. So it's those three kind of pillars that we're looking at to push Jenkins even further into the future. If you want any more details on that, then definitely get involved with Jenkins. All of this is happening in open source. None of this is proprietary. None of the things that I've talked about today are proprietary to CloudBees. This is all, can you advance the slide for me? Didn't work again. So again, this is all open source. If you want to get involved, there's the Jenkins users email thread. There's the Jenkins dev email thread for developers. There's the IRC channel for Jenkins, Jenkins community, Jenkins infrastructure. And there's also one for, I think it's Jenkins UI now, or Jenkins UX for the Blue Ocean stuff. So there are more and more channels with which to contribute and find out everything that's going on within Jenkins for that. And I've made mention of Jenkins World. That's happening September 13th to 15th in Santa Clara, California. There should be probably several thousand people there to talk about Jenkins and share their experiences with that. There are Jenkins online meetups. We did a virtual conference for Jenkins 2.0 a few weeks back. I talked about a lot of this content, and there's going to be more of the online meetups. And there are also local Jenkins area meetups, and the map in the background is all the different places where those are available now. So they're springing up all over the world. So if you check the meetup page, there should be a local Jenkins meetup for you where you can actually go talk to other Jenkins users, find out how they're using Jenkins, and see presentations from either Jenkins users or other applications that are integrated with Jenkins and how those things are integrated with Jenkins as well. So with that, I want to turn this over to Brian to talk a little bit more about, where we've taken Jenkins to 2.0 and also where that's going to, how that's going to play with the CloudBees Jenkins platform as well.
Thank you, Patrick. So I will go ahead and take control of the slide advancing from here. Or try. There we go. Okay. So, as we've discussed, and as many of you are aware based on the poll results with, I think, over 50% using Jenkins for CI, Jenkins has established itself as the most widely adopted automation engine. As Patrick has highlighted with providing pipeline as code, pipeline visualization, and other features in Jenkins 2, we are moving to extending Jenkins from just being the most widely adopted automation engine with an extensive plugin ecosystem, but also being the preferred platform for orchestrating continuous delivery pipelines. So to look at why this is, I'll reference a statistic that Patrick had covered earlier in a similar form, coming from the 2015 Jenkins Community Survey. And when we polled people on how they use Jenkins, what we found is that if you sort of carefully analyze this, you arrive at greater than 50% of respondents are finding that greater than 50% of Jenkins users are using Jenkins specifically as an engine to automate practices that are components of continuous delivery, such as code quality scan, test, release, and deployment. So while the majority of respondents to the poll on this call are using Jenkins for CI, there is a clear trend to use of Jenkins for CD. Moreover, if we look further at Jenkins usage, we do end up finding that greater than 60% use Jenkins on 10 or more teams. And in fact, the largest block use Jenkins on more than 50 plus teams. Of these, people also say that they consider Jenkins mission critical. Now what this does is this sets the stage or highlights the need for being able to run Jenkins and continuous delivery at scale. So if we think about what you need to reliably run Jenkins at scale, you need ongoing support and maintenance for your Jenkins users groups and users community. You need security and compliance. You need to ensure your Jenkins servers and your Jenkins masters are hardened. You need to ensure the processes which you orchestrate within Jenkins are in line with your security policy and compliance needs. You need to be able to run, as we say, Jenkins at scale. So Jenkins should be able to scale to meet demand without failing or increasing operations overhead. You need to be able to still manage some control and visibility across your Jenkins masters or your Jenkins deployment. And if you're able to achieve these, you can arrive at a place where you can use Jenkins to not only facilitate continuous delivery, but to facilitate continuous delivery at an enterprise scale. So a picture of how that looks in a CloudBees universe or with CloudBees solutions is if you pair Jenkins 2 with its large plugin ecosystem, base that on support from CloudBees, and then deploy CloudBees Jenkins platform, either enterprise or private SaaS edition, to achieve the security, scalability, and manageability we outlined in the previous pyramid, you can arrive at a place where you can comfortably and reliably deliver enterprise continuous delivery at scale. So to look at that a little closer, we'll just take a quick look at the differentiation between some of the major features provided by Jenkins 2 and some of the major features provided by Jenkins 2 with CloudBees. As we can see, and as Patrick has discussed, Jenkins 2 firmly embraces continuous delivery and better orchestration of your CI and continuous delivery pipelines with pipeline as code, stage view, and supports easy adoption with an improved UI. To support enterprise scale of Jenkins 2, CloudBees further enables Jenkins with user management with role-based access controls, cluster operations, and managed masters along with high availability. The ability to look into and manage not only your build performance, but manage your scaling of your Jenkins infrastructure with build and performance analytics and monitoring. And we also allow rapid and elastic scale with support for virtual environments and cloud native support. So a quick look at what we mean when we say CloudBees Jenkins platform. We're referring to really two platforms, two versions of the CloudBees Jenkins platform. On the left here, we see the CloudBees Jenkins Platform Enterprise Edition with cloud-native support underneath. And a key feature when we look at the diagram in the middle, which admittedly may be hard for you to see, is this concept of CloudBees Jenkins Operations Center, or CJOC, which allows you to manage your build nodes, your shared agents, as well as allows you to manage multiple masters, providing the features that we discussed on the previous slide. The other edition of CloudBees Jenkins Platform, or CJP, is Private SaaS Edition. So Private SaaS Edition provides you what I would term as a turnkey, internally managed CD as a service solution. So you can provide self-service master provisioning, you can manage your infrastructure in a resilient, elastic way, and you can leverage either your own private cloud with OpenStack, or you can leverage a virtual private cloud with Amazon Web Services. It also gives you rich analytics for managing that infrastructure and gives easy access and onboarding to shared resources. And I think it's important, looking at the question and answers, that there's a number of people asking or stating that they are excited about the Jenkins 2 features, but in adopting Jenkins 2, they want to know if there's been additional improvements in regards to high availability, managing multiple masters, or the equivalent of what we call cluster operations. And really, with CloudBees Jenkins Platform, Enterprise Edition, or Private SaaS Edition, you are able to take all the wonderful benefits that the communities provided in Jenkins 2 and extend that with those features that we're referring to in the channel. So I like to say that Jenkins 2 now is the most widely adopted automation engine with an extensive plugin ecosystem that allows for powerful orchestration of continuous delivery pipelines, such that you can use Jenkins and Pipeline to connect all your continuous delivery tools, ultimately be able to deliver your software using Jenkins more faster and more reliably. And with the approach to drop-in replacement and a focus on making Jenkins 2 an evolution, not a revolution, we've ensured that Jenkins 2 is easy to adopt and use. So with Jenkins 2 and the enterprise features that we apply with CloudBees Jenkins Platform, Jenkins 2 and CloudBees Jenkins Platform become your solution for enterprise continuous delivery or continuous delivery at scale. So before I move on, I want to take a moment to conduct another poll. And on this poll, we're asking, to what extent does your organization practice continuous integration or continuous delivery? And this is with or without Jenkins for those respondents that are not using Jenkins. And I'll wait for a sec for the poll to start. Oh, go ahead and get it there. Okay, it looks like the poll's been completed. So some interesting results. Oops, nope, we are looking at the incorrect poll. Jules.
Yeah, the poll isn't
All right, we
coming
didn't
up,
receive the
but
poll.
if attendees are interested in answering, you can put it into the chat window and we can take a look after and get an idea of how it went.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to get your responses on this within the chat window, and we'll go ahead and take a look at and analyze those ourselves after we conclude the presentation. Thank you. So as next steps, I intentionally did not drill completely into all the features provided by CJP. As Patrick said, we do encourage you to take a look at Jenkins 2, take a look at Jenkins 2 Pipeline, and of course register for Jenkins World so you can get more details on Jenkins 2. But if you are interested in running Jenkins 2 at scale within your enterprise or within your organization, please also take the opportunity to download the CloudBees Jenkins platform trial at cloudbees.com/get-started, and be aware that you can trial CloudBees Jenkins platform using Docker. You can trial it on-prem, or you can trial it on AWS or Azure using the cloud native support. And if you'd like more information on on Jenkins 2 or the CloudBees Jenkins Platform Enterprise Solutions, you can email us at info@cloudbees.com. So thank you. With that, guys, I think we're ready to move into answering some of the questions that have come up in chat. We are running just a bit behind on the webinar, so if we don't get to your question, we will look to follow up on your question offline. Oh, fantastic. Okay, so let's take a moment to get answers to this poll. To what extent does your organization practice CI or CD? I see answers rapidly coming in. We'll continue till we have roughly 75% responding. Okay, it looks like the votes are settling. All right, excellent. Thanks for responding to that. So we see that 25% of our organizations are practicing CI individually on individual teams or in an ad hoc manner. 47%, which is an impressive number, are practicing CI and CD across multiple teams, leveraging some form of a shared platform or shared administration of those solutions. 18% classify their usage as continuous integration or CD as a service, which I would tend to interpret and I would tend to classify as you're providing it as a managed solution. 2% are deploying a cloud native CD as a service solution, and we have 7% that are not practicing CI. Well, it's good to see that we have people well along sort of scaling CD across the organization, and I do see that there is a need for people to take those shared solutions and move them to a more managed CD as a service solution. So thanks for your responses to the poll. With that, let's move to answering a few of the questions that have come in. So I'll go ahead and moderate the questions for you, Patrick. I will pick through some of the ones that we found widely applicable here. And so one of the questions here is, I am already using the pipeline plugin with Jenkins 1.651. Can you please elaborate on what's new in Jenkins 2.0 with respect to the pipeline plugin? And there was another question to this effect, Patrick, which basically asked, if I'm already using the pipeline features with Jenkins 1, why should I move to Jenkins 2? Okay, it looks like we're having some issues, some technical issues with Patrick unmuting. So we will go ahead and unmute Patrick. Just a moment here. So for one of the other organizers on the presentation, are you able to unmute Patrick? My panel is freezing.
Unfortunately not, but do you have an answer to this you'd like to give out, Brian?
Well, in consideration of time, I'm going to give you the short and easy answer in regards to pipeline, and that's going to be you've gained the stage view pipeline visualization capability, which previously was a feature that was only available in CloudBees Jenkins platform with a CloudBees license. And that has been something that, based on conversations I've had with people, have caused many people who had already looked at pipelines in Jenkins 1 to revisit pipeline for Jenkins 2. In addition, there's a number of features that aid in creation of pipeline scripts, such as the inline syntax highlighting. And then, of course, as Patrick covered, there's a number of usability features and really improvements, sort of leaning of Jenkins that are not available in Jenkins 1. And it sounds like Patrick may have come off mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Patrick. Okay. Do you want to chime in on the answer to that?
Yeah, that only took 5 minutes to hit the mute button and get it to actually respond. Sorry about that. So to the question, so Stage View was released as kind of a bucket list of things we wanted to get done for 2.0, but all of those things are done within plugins. So all of the plugins, we made the conscious choice not to require 2.0. So all the new plugins coming out, if you look at the minimum version for Jenkins, most of them are around 1.609 or so. So if you're on a 1.6 version of Jenkins, all the pipeline stuff should continue to work. The only thing that's really going to be different is the setup experience of setting up and having pipeline installed out of the box with the setup wizard. However, as we move forward, the 2.0 line has taken off from the 1.0 line. So the next LTS release in Jenkins will be 2.6, 2.7, 2.8. I'm not sure the exact number for when that's coming out. But there will no longer be an LTS release of the 1.x line, and there won't be a head release for the 1.x line. So the only reason to upgrade is that it's a continuation of the existing Jenkins line. But the plugins themselves will tell you what version you can use that with. So as far as pipeline goes, the announcement is with the 2.0 kind of umbrella, but those plugins will continue to work for that.
Excellent. Hi, everybody. It looks like we've got to wrap this up, and we do apologize if your questions were not answered, but please note that all questions that were not fielded here will be forwarded to Patrick, Brian, and their team to address. Patrick and Brian, it was great having you both here today. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Once again, this is Jared Richter from DevOps.com. And just a reminder, this presentation and its slides will be available on DevOps.com within 24 hours. Everybody have a great day, and thank you again for joining us.